Hello, hello, hello. July 10th, 2019 with CCO Live with Jennifer and Alicia. Hello. I will turn on my
Hello,
camera too,
guys.
just for briefly, just to make a grand entrance.
What?
How you doing, ladies?
A nice
Good.
boy doesn't have to dress up.
You know
Nope.
what? I was watching a video with somebody I follow on YouTube, and it's these two guys, and the one guy does all the behind the scenes, but he's also in a lot of the videos. He does all the editing, all the marketing and everything. And it made me think of Boyd, and they've only been working together 3 years, and we've been together over 8. And he was talking about how people don't, he wasn't like bemoaning, but he said people don't realize or appreciate what he does. He comes up with most of the content, and he goes, I spent hours editing all these videos as well, and I was like, oh yeah, I knew that guy did that. And I thought, I knew how much hard work he does because we got Boyd. We don't have to do that.
But I can walk into a big conference and nobody knows who I am. Whereas if you or Jennifer go into a conference, everybody's
right.
like,
Yeah.
who are these gurus in front of me, right?
Right. But doesn't that make you, I mean, like him, his friend who, he was saying that they'll ignore him and talk to the other guy and talk about how much they like his videos and discount how much work he really does, and it's like, oh my gosh, no.
Okay, that was
I
officially
know.
1 minute of fame for me. So I think I've got 9 minutes
There you
left in
go.
my life. Thank you. So we're not just about talking about me today. We're going to talk about, what's our topic today, ladies? ICD-10 2020 stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, hold on. I'll change the slide now that I'm back on track. See how good Boyd does? So guess what, guys? The new guidelines, the new codes for 2020 came out. And so we were going to talk about them. If you want to know the link on how to see them in their most generic form from the CDC, they come out with who puts them out? The World Health Organization. So if you want to see them,
Who does?
by all means, there's the link. What?
Who puts them out?
Not what?
The
Who?
CDC. Who? Oh, Boyd's being funny. Ha ha. See what Boyd has to work with?
But you stopped her in her tracks, Boyd. You got her.
The CDC puts them out after WHO puts them out, which is the World Health Organization, not who's on first and all that other kind of stuff. And again, if you use this link, it's very generic, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's and what's that old font? What's the old
type? Old English.
codes.
I don't know what it
Dot,
is.
It's not, how it comes out dot matrix. That's kind of what I think of it as. Now I can see some of you guys go back and type in the chat what it is that that system that used to come up, when we first got computers back in the 80s. Remember, everything was in that one font. Sidetracking. Now, if you want to know when we're going to do our official videos and release of the new content, meaning the new guideline changes, the new codes and stuff like that, you can become an insider with CCO. So it's very easy to do. Just go to the cco.us/insider. It's more than a newsletter. It allows you to get the behind the scenes and heads up without joining our club. Now, if you're a CCO member in our club, then wow, you're right there getting the pulse and doing things with us at the same time we're doing. The insider just gives you a heads up. Okay, as if you're getting a newsletter or notification. Okay, and it's free. We'll be probably putting out the new, doing a video on the new content probably pretty quickly now. So we have a lot of behind the scenes people talking about Boyd that helps so much and does so much behind the scenes. We also have our subject matter experts, and we have interns that help us quite a bit, and they'll be helping us create slide decks to talk about the changes that come in the year, as well as Tiffany, who is also the one that updates now our BAT technique and helps us write questions for our test banks and stuff. So she will be working on this, and we'll talk to her more in the future. So again, if you want to know the codes right ahead, from what they look like from scratch, then you can go to the CDC site. If you want to know ahead of time when we're going to release our videos where we tell you about the changes, the ICD-10 changes, as well as the PCS changes and the CPT changes, but they all come out at different times. So first that'll be launched is ICD-10. We like to tell you the reasons why, not just list all the changes. And I was showing this list to Jennifer before, and I said, this is, this is the format that it comes in. You literally get a list, and if you go to that CDC website, let me just pull it over real quick for you. This may bug boy. Let's see if we can. It may be over too far, but let me see if I can make it like this and pull it over. Anyway,
Yeah, put it in the
needless
middle.
to say, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
So you can click on those links and download the files. That's just a list that comes up just like that without the decimals in there. Or you can get the addendum. You can get the list of drugs. You can get the neoplasm table, things like that. Then you can get the tabular. All of that's in there, but it's in that old dot matrix format type thing. Literally, the very first code in the ICD manual is A00.0, cholera. So I just grabbed these just to kind of let you see how it lists out. When you get that list, what you can do is do a Control F and then type in the code that you want, and it'll drop it down and go locate it, because again, this is just scrolling one page after another. Nothing else but this in there. Very boring. But now, before I monopolize the conversation any more than I already have, got to give don't think that Jennifer isn't not going to talk. But we were talking about some of the changes and stuff. Yeah. And of course, she knows that I'm a huge ICD fan, right? That's like you having me tell you about my favorite ice cream. If I liked sports, my favorite sport. It's just like da 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 da. But she's got some really cool things that she found when she was researching the changes. And so it's going to be fun for her to talk about some of those. The first thing, you guys, when you start looking at the changes, they're either going to revise, add, or delete something. That's the three things that they're going to do. But it's not that big of a deal, honestly, is it, Jennifer? Because this is a great example of them revising the verbiage. And let me just show you what this looks like before we talk about this a little bit more. Let me just grab one of these. See how it says revise this list? Yeah. This is literally what that CDC format looks like. So I just grabbed all of these B codes right here, and it says revise, revise, revise. Then this add code, and you can scroll this down all the way down to the bottom where it gives you some statistics and stuff like that. But wow, there you go. I didn't know this.
Yeah,
look there. Can you see that?
273 additions, 21 deletions, and 30 revisions. So it's not a lot. And Whitney had commented that as well, that it doesn't seem as many as last year. And no, there isn't as many changes as last year. So I remember last year was just, but they added all those diabetes ones last year. And just whole bunch of codes that just adding little colons or something like that. So yeah, this year there's not as many. So
yeah. And another thing that's really cool about these guys is that there's always a reason behind what they do. And I think, tell me if you think this is right also, Jennifer, they tend every year to focus on something. Like the year before last, it was eyes, blindness. They gave a higher specificity to the level of blindness. And I noticed that was a big area that changed. but the guidelines themselves and the code sets, it's not. There always seems to be a reason or a theme. I tend to find. I don't know. Do you notice that too, or do you think it feels like a
Well,
hodgepodge to you, or what?
well, given the scope of the size of all of this, they probably can only look at certain areas, would be my assumption. I haven't worked with the board at all, but to know that there are only certain areas. So whether one society has started to notice that, wait, we're having a problem here, let's add some of these diagnoses, because that's actually what happens is it's listed in the book. You can write in and request adjustments of sorts or more diagnoses or such. So, but you got to remember they do this every year, so they're kind of on a time frame, a time crunch to what can we do, what's the most prevalent, probably is what it comes down to. What are we seeing the most of that needs to be adjusted? So
Right. I can tell you there's a code that I know that's going to come out, or we don't have a coding clinic yet on it. Maybe we'll get one this year on diabetes 1.5, because that has been around since the 80s, and we're getting a lot more talk about LADA, which is LADA type of diabetes. It's a diabetes that starts out as type 2 diabetes, and then 10-15 years later into it develops into type 1 diabetes. And that is if you understand how diabetes works, that is 2 completely different types of diabetes. That's almost like change in cell structure or something. It's really crazy. But I've met doing lectures now 2 individuals that are LADA diabetics, and before I had heard of it, I had no idea. So that's kind of interesting. We'll find something. This particular slide, did you want to say something?
Oh, no. I
heard you.
I used to work in primary care, and yeah, that is, they don't meet this requirement, but yet they don't meet this requirement. So how exactly are we supposed to code it? So that has been a problem for quite a while. So
yeah, and like I said, now that people ask, what do you do? And you almost have to say, well, are we going to code them type 1 and then turn them to type 2, which is type 1 is a congenital type of diabetes. You're born that way. Type 2 is not. And so, that's like turning somebody into a congenital anomaly. But anyway, it'll be really interesting and I think the easiest thing they'll be able to do is just give it their own code. This particular slide where I picked it was just to see how they revise. And sometimes the revisions are so small that you can't see it at first. So what it comes out like this when I was showing you that dot matrix type font. So the code, and they leave the decimals off when they do this. So B96.21. The only thing that they changed in this type of E. coli, if you notice that what I've highlighted in yellow, it's not a parenthetical, it's brackets. So what it was revised from, the STEC is in parentheticals, and then in the new revision, it's in brackets. Now, how many of you guys understand the difference between brackets and parentheticals when it goes to talking about the descriptions and stuff like that? Do you guys remember? Some of you guys have been coding for a while. You may have even forgot, because you don't even think about what it means. You just know. It's like driving and looking at a stop sign. You don't think, oh, that's a stop sign. It's an octagon shape. It's red. No, you don't think about that. It's just a stop sign. So parenthetical, it's just a parenthetical. We don't think about it, but it does have a different meaning. And does anybody? You can put it in the chat if you know what that means. And then Jennifer, do you remember what it means, or does it stump you? Can you remember?
Don't remember.
I'm looking at her because she's in my external monitor. Did I put you on the spot?
Yes,
well,
you did. I
the
could have
thing
grabbed my book out, but I didn't.
You guys don't know it, but Jennifer is a whole lot smarter than me.
I can't remember all those little things. That's with
She-
still gets me. I still, they came out with what 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm like, okay, but does that mean this? I got to read it over like 4
Does it
times
really
before I try to come up with a code. Yeah, especially in
guys don't have that
orthopedics,
problem,
with
right?
is not something we use. So that's
That's like the yesterday for the CCO club. I did the history of, and talked about that a little bit, and what we as coders say is a history of, and what a provider says is a history. That's like speaking, the Queen's English and American English. It sounds like it's the same, but it's not always. So I can't even, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't remember what the brackets mean, but the parenthetical means it's included. Okay. I do know that because we teach you that when you're looking at things in the index. However, the brackets, I don't remember what the brackets mean either. So I was hoping Jennifer was,
Whitney.
Who did?
Whitney
did. Yes, but see, I have YouTube up, and Jennifer has Facebook up. So what did she say?
The term that follows the parenthetical clarifies the preceding information.
What does the brackets mean, though? The parenthetical, I know. It's the
brackets. This is the term that follows the parenthetical. So no, this doesn't have a parenthetical. Okay. But they changed, I guess, because they changed this parenthetical to a bracket, indicating that information is not supposed to be clarifying, because doesn't STEC stand for Shiga toxin E. coli?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So okay. Right. So
it does.
Yeah, I don't use E. coli.
So it's like, why do you need to? So the understanding grammatically is, why do you need to put it in a parenthetical when that's what it actually means? Just like E. coli is in brackets because that's what it means, So we don't think of grammar. Now you guys learned tonight that it is there's grammatical content in our code set. So again, this is a revision, and it can be something as simple as this. So I know in the past, a long time ago, when I first started coding, I used to get that little panicked feeling whenever the new code set was going to come out, because I thought, oh my gosh, well, I got to learn all the changes. But you know what? More than half of the changes are stuff like this, very minute, that really don't carry a lot of weight. But here is a really cool one. This is when they add content. And this is my favorite thing, because it means we got a new code. Now, it doesn't mean that we got a, when I say we got a new code, it still kind of has that parent code, the D75, but it is a even higher specificity, not like just saying, okay, now we have laterality, we say left and right. Okay. To me, that's not really a new code. That's just adding specificity. This is actually a new code. So what I did was I copied from Find a Code what we have in 2019 in the D75s, and we have 0.0 for familial erythrocytosis, secondary polycythemia, which is 0.1. Then you have that code range for blood disorders and stuff, and then you have unspecified, because we always usually had unspecified. But what they would have used in the past would have been a 0.8 code, because it would have been other, because you couldn't have gotten to this specificity. So this tells me that this particular type of deficiency, this G6PD, is prevalent enough that it needs to be identified for statistical purposes, because that's why we code. That's why this code set was created, for us to be able to study it and track it statistically. So from this point going forward, we now have a higher specificity for a specific disease /disease process, or /, I don't know. It will be D75.A. And that means that maybe in the future we might have a B or whatever, but they could have used D75.2 or 0.3. See how much you've got all of this room for growth in ICD. That's why it was so much better than 9. So this was a really interesting one. If you guys don't know what this particular type of deficiency is, then write it down in your little notebook that we always tell you to keep, that type in G6PD, and don't, it may give you Georgia's police department. But you may want to put glucose or put G6PD without anemia or deficiency or something like that. But anyway, I thought that was really, really interesting. Now, if you're not, you know, I don't even know what this is used to identify in somebody. Obviously, it affects anemia because it's without anemia. I understand glucose, you know, and how that relates to diabetes, but oftentimes, and you know, I love the disease process, so much more of the disease process is that chemical balance in our body. You know, I'm always tooting off that our heart is chemical, muscular, and electrical, right? And if we get too much calcium or too much potassium or vice versa, you know, too little or whatever, you can trip yourself into getting, you know, having a heart failure. So
Do you want to know what it is?
yeah, I do. Did you look it up?
It's a genetic disorder that most often affects males. It happens when the body doesn't have enough of an enzyme called G6PD, and it helps the red blood cells work and protects them from substances in the blood that can harm them.
Thus the anemia, without anemia. Wow. Okay. So it's like your body is affected, it's affecting the red blood cells, but you don't have anemia. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that just made us smarter, guys. So smart.
There's your Jeopardy question.
Yeah.
And it's not a Georgia Police Department.
It's not the Georgia 6th Precinct Police Department or whatever, 6th County or whatever. I got Georgia on my brain because I may get to go to Marietta, Georgia, and speak at their chapter. So if you're in Georgia, I may get to come and see you guys in the end of the year. Let's see. So what happens when they delete a code? Well, usually they don't just throw out a code, right? They give it a higher specificity. So they deleted D813, which is adenosine deaminase deficiency, ADA. Another thing I don't know. But I'm sure somebody's going to let us know. Go look that up.
Okay.
But they got rid of that code. This is like a parent code, and now you can get to a higher specificity. So it'll be D81.30 for unspecified, 1 for due to this other, it's severe combined immunodeficiency. So now we know that this particular ADA deficiency has something that will affect the immunodeficiency of the body. And then we got a 0.2, which is a higher specificity because it says it's an AD2 deficiency. And then they give us now, obviously there's even more because they give us an other. That's, and so if we have this and we don't have the criteria, doesn't meet any of the codes that we have, we now have an other, a 0.9 that we can use. For anybody that's newer to ICD, if you're a newer coder, when you see a code that ends in 9, it usually means unspecified, but not always. Sometimes it's other. Sometimes 8s are others. But in this particular instance, they gave other a 9, and an O is unspecified. So that's a little wonky, isn't it? Because usually it's
usually it's
that.
9. Yeah, you're right. This is an inherited condition that damages the immune system. So it can affect different stages, different ages, and different types of different symptoms and such. So I assume that's why there's different categories within the
higher
diagnosis.
specificity
So, yeah.
due to, yeah, so we can get an
Yeah.
immunodeficiency. You know what? As we learn more about enzymes, just the enzymes in our stomach, there's too many to count. They can say how many's in there, and they
Like
know
billions
that
or
certain there's like billions. They know that certain enzymes do certain things. They're triggered and they have responses and so on and so forth, but they can't always identify which of the
Which one?
billions does it. And so that's a huge study that they do. I know that when I was going to have gastric surgery and the doctor had said that, you know, if a person has type 2 diabetes and they have gastric bypass or gastric sleeve, when they wake up, they will no longer be a type 2 diabetic. And I said, yeah, I did some study on that and I found out why. It's because of the enzymes. And I said, how come they just can't identify the enzyme, find something to kill that enzyme that, you know, triggers that, and then we could get rid of type 2 diabetes. And he said, well, if it was that easy, he said, we know that it's the enzyme that is in like the fundus, the top part, the curvature of the stomach. So they even know the location where it comes from. But he says there's like billions of them and they haven't identified which one it is yet. And he said it'll be years and years before they can. So again, we don't even know the tip of the iceberg, right? And this is another, well, that's pretty cool stuff. Let me look. Okay. So this particular person's name is Child of Christ. So it's not that there are insufficient red blood cells, but they aren't working as they should or aren't able to. Yes, that's the way I would think that would be described. Yep. Oh, right. So I've got my right eye. This in the camera, I know it's different, but my right eye is on my external monitor over here, and I'm looking at YouTube, and my left eye is over here on this external monitor that has my pic. You know, I can see myself and Jennifer, and all that other stuff I want to show you. So it's like you can see me turning my head. Jennifer doesn't have. Do you have two monitors right there in front of you?
I just have my computer in front of me with you and the slides and everything, and then my monitor over to this side has the Facebook and everything. So
yeah,
and that's where I'm looking up stuff is on the slide on the side of me.
Quit
so
messing with my curtain. Oh, there's my son. You guys don't know that, but they're on these casual webinars. My son, one of my number 4, is behind me. Okay.
Mine's over there.
So now here's the revision. Yeah, we have kids, guys.
He's being good.
So's mine. He said he was trying to fix the curtain, and his service dog's on the floor here. Sometimes he comes around and looks at me, and that means he wants his boy to do something for him. He knows I'll tell him to do it. Now, okay. So next, out of the revise, add, and delete, we showed you that one revision. This is a really interesting one. This is a revision to G43.80. They revised the verbiage in that they added content, and now it says in migraine for both of these codes. And so we have cyclical vomiting, not intractable. And then but now it says in migraine. If how many of you guys know, comment if you know what, first of all, intractable means, and if you know what cyclical, I think that's how you say it. That's the way I say it. Think of like cycle.
Cyclical?
I think that's the way, yeah, cyclical. It's like a bike, I know.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You know me, I'm always saying things wrong. But I can tell you it's like projectile vomiting. This is something that's common when people who have migraines, if you throw up, which is common, one of the ways it tells them something, and I don't know what it is, because my son that has the epilepsy, he would get really massive migraines and he would have this type of vomiting thing. We would call it projectile, but it's like Oh my gosh, it's like what's the ladies whose head turned around and she shot the pea green soup because she was possessed? You know
Linda
what I'm talking
Blair
about?
or
What,
something?
yeah, Linda Blair. It's like, wow, how did you do that? And it has something to do with the migraines. Now people can do this, but who did you even know that the way that you have emesis or you throw up can be an indication of what's wrong with you? Who knew, right? Did you know
Yeah.
that?
I just know I don't like to do
So
it. That's it.
again, yeah. I usually always felt better. It's like, no, get it over with. My mother would do anything not to. But
Oh yeah.
anyway, when you've been pregnant so many times, right, that you just kind of get used to it. So intractable, I'm looking to see if anybody mentioned what intractable means.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
No.
So you'll see this word a lot of times with things that have to do with the brain, which G codes are. In epilepsy, if you have intractable epilepsy, which my son does, it means that the treatments aren't working. They're not. It's so far, or for whatever reason, the treatments that they're using is not stopping the seizures. Okay, so even though it's managed, or it's not being managed, not meaning that they're not trying, it's the fact that what they're trying is not working. And so when it's intractable vomiting, then if they give them Zofran or whatever, it doesn't stop it. Nothing stops it. And that's what he would have. I mean, he would just, you could give him, even Benadryl is given sometimes to calm the stomach. But he shoot him up with tons of Zofran, didn't make a difference. He would just throw up and throw up and throw up until he finally went to sleep and didn't wake. And sometimes he'd wake himself up throwing up. So that's intractable. But if you take Zofran and it works and it stops it like it's supposed to, then it would be the G43.80 because it's not intractable. It's treatable. So isn't that cool? I hope you guys are learning extra stuff. All right, here's another one. This one's fun, but really, honestly, Jennifer has some fun stuff she's going to tell us about here in a minute. She was reading up the guidelines and stuff. Yeah. My knowledge ends at the end of the slides, okay? So what they did was, they don't do this very often. And Jennifer and I were talking before we came on live. It does happen, but not very often. So they took H8.4 or H1.4, vertigo of central origin, okay, before we were able to get to a higher specificity. They gave it laterality, right? Now they took all those away. Very seldom when you get to a higher specificity, they don't take it away. That's like saying, oh, I'll give you 5 cookies. Oh, good. But no, I'm going to take 4 away. You only get 1. Why would you do that? And so, so they did. It's almost like they instead of broadening the focus and the ability to code to a higher specificity, they narrowed the focus. Why? It has to obviously do with the disease process. It'd be really interesting to find out, what their thought process was behind
I
that.
could assume that to try and figure out the vertigo as to which ear, is it always in one ear when you have vertigo? I mean, that's kind of, I hear of people having vertigo, but I don't know if it's always as
well.
I don't know. And is it too because the brain works backwards? The right side controls the left and the left side controls the right. So maybe the right ear. I don't know. But yeah, that would be pretty interesting. Yeah.
That is good point. I do know that usually when they say central origin, they're talking about the inner ear. Okay, so we know that it's some type of vertigo in the central, or the center part of the ear. However, you're right. I wonder if that people, because people weren't coding to a higher specificity and using right and left and bilateral, they were just using unspecified because they didn't know, because it wasn't documented. Maybe they didn't use the other code, so they said, well, why do we have this higher specificity if nobody's using it? And you know,
I would think too, maybe the society said, all right, we're getting so many queries, we don't know how to or we just call it vertigo. It doesn't matter if it's right or left or bilateral, it's all treated the same. So that could be, too, that
the higher
the
specificity just doesn't matter.
Yeah, the neurological society or whatever said, hey, this isn't important. So
yeah, you're right. That is probably, I like that. That's probably what it is. Because they do statistically track. I mean, yes, the World Health Organization, WHO, tracks it, but our CDC tracks it. So World Health Organization, they're doing diagnosis codes for mortality universally. And then our CDC does it for mortality and morbidity in the United States. And but they're like cousins, and so they're tracking these statistics. And but I'm sure it had something really said disease process or statistical. I'm sorry I didn't get the R on there. Red.
Oh.
I think this is the last one that I had before that kind of cool stuff that that Jennifer found. What they did now is they gave us 2 new codes for I codes. So it has to do with the cardiovascular system. I26.93, we now can get to a higher specificity on single subsegmental pulmonary embolism without acute, what is the COR, pulmonary? I can't remember what the COR stands for. Coronary, I guess it is coronary pulmonary, yeah. And then this one, it just says embolism or emboli without acute. Now, don't freak out, guys. If you see this one says embolism and this says emboli, they abbreviate words all the time. Emboli is an embolism, okay? So don't think that is.
Well, emboli is plural for embolism, because one is a single and the other is multiple. So it's plural. Yeah.
So single and multiple. So don't freak out when you think that the wording is are they talking about something else? Well, it's single and this is multiple. It's in the description. So this is what we had as of 2019. We had the 0.90, 0.92, and 0.99. Again, here that 9 is other, like we mentioned before. And we had septic and saddle embolus. Now, if you had never heard about the saddle embolus, that's a cool thing. I did some research on that. I think it was last year I tried to really beef up my interventional radiology knowledge, and this was something that I studied a little bit, with saddle embolus. I'd never heard of it before, and so that was pretty cool. And I actually got to see it in documentation, and so I was like, cool. So anyway, so that's how they gave us a high. Oh, well, now I guess I had the one more. When they delete, yeah, because I just go crazy over this stuff. I mean, I like this almost better than chocolate. Not really, but almost. So they deleted I48.1, which is persistent AFib, and they added an even higher specificity. Now we can do long-standing persistent AFib or other persistent AFib. And so we got, they just deleted the code because they have a higher specificity. And then also chronic AFib, they did the same thing. They gave us chronic AFib unspecified, and then permanent AFib, which would be chronic. I guess permanent is different than chronic. And so that's pretty cool. I think that's really, really exciting. the higher specificity we can get in ischemic disorders allows us to track that treatment, what works and medications that work and everything. It was really fun studying all that stuff last year. So we were just talking before, and Jennifer had said before we came on air, and Jennifer said, well, did you see the guidelines that changed for MIs? I'm like, no, I was just looking at codes. And she goes, and most of the changes are, so I'll let her tell about that, and I'll be quiet and look at some of the comments for a while. This was really cool stuff she was telling me.
So there have been many sites that came out with, HEMA and APC. Everybody came out on June 20th once the CMS came out with these changes. So some of them broke them down a little bit more into what those actually are. So the biggest changes are coming in the S&T chapter. 87 new changes there, or new codes, and 75 new codes in the external cause codes. And I'll go into some of those. That's V through Y. But the myocardial infarction, they said that one of the changes come that the note under myocardial infarction, I-21.A1, is going to now read you must code first and not also. So they changed one of the guidelines to coding this myocardial infarction. Code first the underlying causes of the MI. And they also removed heart failure and renal failure from that list of codes. So you're not coding any of those as the reason for the myocardial infarction. And then she did some of the new embolism codes there. But of course, some, I deal a lot in the S&T section, the orthopedics ones. So some of the big ones in that area came from, we used to just have fracture of the skull or the bones. So now they actually have the orbital walls, the medial, lateral. I mean, I don't deal with that much in mine, of course, because we don't deal with face fractures. But so some of these fractures of the orbital wall are changing as well. They're changing also some of the T toxic codes. And they're also including heat stroke and sunstroke now. So they're adding the T67 and family of codes for heat stroke and sunstroke. So that's pretty interesting. Of course, I thought the funniest one is in our external cause codes. I can't say, oh, sorry, here's my son. I can't say, I can't say it's funny, but I used to always find it fun to look through the old ICD-9 book and just look at some of these codes that they, things I've never heard of before, or some of the gunshot codes I thought were interesting. The gingerbread tumor, I remember that. We always, what's a gingerbread tumor? That's kind of weird. But
I like the sitting on a knitting needle. I always liked that one.
Yeah, it's like really that many people did that you have to, yeah. Hold on, I gotta copy and send my daughter a text to come see what my son needs right now. So just a minute, shush. So
I got a funny story to tell you afterwards about children.
So they have in the new external cause codes come the legal intervention is a new series of codes. So resulted numerous additions to Y35, which are codes for, and I'm going to read this here, sorry. Legal intervention involving a conducted energy device. So tasing, stun gun.
I was gonna say, make them guess what that is.
It makes me think of Star Trek, or something. It's just kind of, so it's kind of interesting though too that they have to add digits for the bystander who was injured, or the suspect was injured, or the police officer was injured, or it's a previously injured person. It's just kind of interesting, but that they have that many encounters now, these legal aspects need to be documented as well for statistical purposes, of course, but to create this new category, and not to say all 75 are coming from legal encounters, but that's just kind of interesting that that's a large portion of them. And there will also be some Z code revisions as well. So looking out for some of those new encounter codes. So
yeah. So
what's
a couple
story about kids?
Sharon, oh, well, first Sharon says it's about time they got codes for heat stroke. So let's see. I asked them if anybody, if there was a topic that they would like to request, and Gersie said, she said, what, global warming, and I thought I was very humorous, and I said, I'm sorry, that's too hot a topic. So Sharon put a knitting needle through her hand. Well, now you can code for that.
I know a lot of pencils in the leg or something. You've seen kids in school getting a pencil in their leg or something, but I guess if it's in their back pocket and they sit or something,
right,
or they're bored.
I can see how that.
Or they're bored in school. I don't know. It's just kind of.
It's still those external costs. What makes me laugh with them is, like you said, you know how you get those crazy warning signs on labels and stuff. They don't do that unless somebody actually did it, and there has to be enough people statistically to do that to make a code. So of course, heat stroke. Well, it's about time they got codes for that.
I'm surprised I didn't know one before. Yeah, that's weird.
It's like some of these things. Tasing. Now you can code to a higher specificity for those tasings. You can let our coders out there, make sure you let your ER staff know that, hey, we can code for that, as well as if. Now, I wonder if they could get to a higher specificity with self-inflicted tasing. So if you ever tased yourself, like the officer accidentally shot himself in the foot or something. He was putting his belt on and didn't get his boots on.
Did you ever watch America's Funniest Home Videos? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I used to love that.
So somebody did that one time. They put the dog collar on themselves and they said, well, let's see what this is like. And then they turned it up higher, and oh my gosh, the guy was like jumping out of the chair, freaking, and I guess that would be his code for self-inflicted tasing. I don't know if that includes dog collars, but
it would be an electronic device, an electrical current. Our service dogs they didn't get trained with shock collars, but they have had shock collars on them. I
must have heard you. Now I got the dog over here.
Oh, now your dog's there. So yeah.
Now he's asking for attention.
So what about an electric fence? Because if you've ever backed into an electric fence before, it doesn't have enough of a bite to like injure you. But if you backed into an electrical fence and then fell and broke your ankle, that would be bad. So I guess that would be an external cause. So I'll tell you my kid's story while she's doing that. Because we're getting close to we're getting close to wrapping up. So we had some friends that, when you get together with your adult friends and the kids all go back in the bedrooms and play or whatever, and they're usually tearing the place apart and stuff, and you're playing cards or just whatever, visiting, and their children had learned that you hold on to your elbow, instead of like interrupting you while you were talking. They would just, when they put their hand on your elbow, that means I want to talk, and then you can stop and and everything. Well, the little boy came in and said, he just waited patiently, and just waited patiently and patiently and patiently. And finally the father looked over and he said, okay, what do you need to tell me? Oh, well, the little girl's name, Susie or whatever, say Susie. Oh, Susie is bleeding. It's like, "Oh, what?" You know, and she jumped off the bunk bed and knocked her head. And of course it wasn't that bad, but of course there was blood everywhere, you know, but he just patiently waited, you know, and he's like, because have you ever told your kids, you know, unless you're bleeding, I don't want to know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
he wanted to ask me if he can get a toy tomorrow. That's what that was so important. And now he's throwing his stuffed animals at me, and the dog's sitting here trying to get in the way too now. So I'm like,
That's usually a
the
sign
dog
it's
won't, the dog
about
won't
time
leave me
to
alone.
wrap this.
He keeps pawing at me to pet him. Grandma's not in town, so I'm the only adult here to take care
That
of him.
you're the only one. So Sharon
Yeah.
says it's an electrical device talking about the fence, and if
No.
you are wet, that fence bites a lot harder. Happened to her sister. Yeah. Yeah. I
I
was
can
just
only
thinking, you know,
imagine.
'cause my folks have cattle, and I don't know, like 300 acres, and they do have most of this just barbed wire fences, but there is areas that I know he's used an electrical fence, and there are times if you've never touched or bumped into an electrical fence, you should do that once in your life. But being wet, absolutely, that would not be fun.
Stop.
I would probably leap and fall flat on my face, and then I would bust my nose and or blacken my eye.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions as we get ready to start wrapping them up?
Whitney did have a question, yes. So,
Oh, good. Whitney, what's your question?
can we give some examples of Z03.89 is appropriate to be used? So Z03.89 is encounter for observation of other suspected diseases and conditions ruled out.
Oh.
So it is very difficult. I did find one example that was given on a site was it says the observation Z codes are always principal or first listed diagnosis, and additional codes are reported only if they're unrelated to that suspected condition being observed, such as a parent is concerned that the patient has pink eye where there are no findings suggestive of pink eye, but the physician notes a mild strabismus. Thank you. And refers to an ophthalmologist. So I guess, you know, where they're suspecting something, waiting to see if there is something, but it's coming back as a negative, or, you know, that they're not finding that there, I guess, would be an example of that.
That's a good example. That help out, Tiffany? We enjoyed Tiffany. She's one of the ones that's real diligent to show up on
Whitney.
on our
Whitney.
webinars. Did I say Tiffany?
Yes.
What did I say? Okay, I'm sorry.
Tiffany.
I realized when you said Whitney again, there's like, oh, I have a friend back home when I grew up with that was a Whitney. I mean, not a friend that I grew up with. Her daughter's a Whitney, and then I also worked for years, long time ago, with a Tiffany. So, and then we have a Tiffany at CCO too. So, yeah, well, that'll be my excuse. I'm sticking to it as to why. That's great. Anybody else? I think I've gone through and seen all the YouTube chats. So, you know, guys, just letting you know that it really is beneficial when you comment on the videos. So feel free to do that. You can share these videos with your friends and colleagues. This CCO Live is meant to be very casual. You know, we do a lot of formal videos and educational videos and stuff like that. Not that this isn't educational, but we want to make sure that you kind of get to know us on a more personal level, and so we don't let our hair down, or we let our hair down as much.
I let mine down,
you know what
today.
I mean?
It's curlier, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, so again, we strive really hard to be warm and fuzzy, and Laureen likes that term, and want to be personable and approachable, so that when you have questions that you'll turn to us, and know that you can go to the cco.us and /club. We've shown you that pretty often. We appreciate if you go in there, you can become a member, and we have a free forum, and we also have a club membership that has all kinds of perks. So come and join us, ask questions, take advantage of all the subject matter experts that we have, our instructors, our not just SMEs, but colleagues, peers like you guys that are asking questions as well as answering questions, and students, and we have interns in there too. So everybody learns from each other. It's another thing that I was thinking about today because I was watching another video while I was doing some other stuff and typing, and someone said something about networking, and coders are really they're networking is a part of what we do because that's how we gain our knowledge base. You're only as smart as the people you surround yourself with. So I'm telling you guys, I'm super smart, aren't I? That's why if I have any video questions, I ask Boyd, or marketing questions. Boyd knows that kind of stuff, and
when we have bloody noses or breast problems, then we talk to Alicia. So I know where to go.
My daughter-in-law came in.
Breast problems, but there are other people in my house.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Boyd's wife going through treatments. So my daughter-in-law came in, before the webinar tonight, and she goes, "Well, hello, doc. I've got a question." And she was showing me. She goes, "What are these bumps on her shoulder?" And because she's pregnant, and they moved her due date up. We're going to have another grandbaby. They moved it to August. It's supposed to be the first week in December because the baby's already 5 pounds. Huge. Anyway,
from December to August.
Yeah.
No.
Right there.
From September.
Good.
To
I was
August.
gonna say, oh my goodness.
No, not December. No. But she was saying, "What are these bumps?" I said, "Are they white?" She goes, "They're not really white." And I was looking at them, and I said, and they went to a water park, and she got burnt. And I said, "Those are just blisters." And she goes, "They don't look like blisters." I said, "No, those are the really superficial blisters. That's all that is." "Oh, okay." And then she was walking.
Mine do that all the time. Mom, my friend's knee, it's really bothering them. What should I'm like, okay, I only work in a doctor's office. I am not a doctor. So.
My children all think that I'm a doctor. Now that they're older, they don't, but my youngest one still does. And my son that is the autistic, he'll even comment, he'll say, "You're a doctor, right?" And no. I don't want to tell anybody that.
Haven't even stayed at a Holiday Inn. I don't know.
Got some chats out there. Hello, Sharon, whoever else is out there in our chat land. Yeah. Thank you for joining us here today. We always appreciate that. Hi, Carmen. This is live. This is not Memorex. So is Memorex even still around? You guys probably know what I'm talking about. But
I know what you're talking about.
I remember that commercial. Is it live?
The guy sitting back in the guy sitting back in the chair with his hair all windblown. Yeah.
I gotta get that somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's on eBay or something. Okay, so
are
we done?
I was looking at something the other day that was dated. Yeah, we're done. You know what?
Yeah.
I feel really good that my children were so well behaved and everybody else was, because usually I feel like it's my children. So I feel really good that it's you guys this time.
Me too.
I had 2 at work, and the one little one here and his sister, my husband's gone, my mother-in-law's gone. I'm like, yeah. So the dog loves me when everybody's gone. He doesn't like me any other time. So.
Everybody at CCO has children. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have lots of children. And Boyd has 2 children, but so I think you're about the smallest amount of children out of everybody. Yeah, I think you are, Boyd, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Everybody else has more than 2.
Yeah. We have 2 kittens, so that gives us another 2 family members. So
there you go.
Anyway. All right.
They can be trouble too.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.